I was halfway through my flight home, scrolling through my phone, when the flight attendant placed a napkin on my tray. I thought it was just polite service, until I read the handwriting. It said, "Pretend you're sick. I'll help you off the plane." I looked up, confused, and shook my head, thinking she made a mistake. She leaned in, lips barely moving, and mouthed, "Row 12 isn't who he says he is." That was the moment everything in my body froze. I had no idea that the man sitting just a few seats away would be on the news later that night. My name is Arden Blake, and what happened on that flight changed how I see strangers forever. Before we go further, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. You're about to hear how a flight attendant saved my life without saying a single word at first. It started like any regular travel day. I had just spent a quiet weekend visiting my family in Phoenix, and I was flying back to Denver for work. My suitcase was stuffed with leftovers my mom insisted I take, and my little brother Cameron had joked as he hugged me goodbye. "Try not to sit next to anyone weird." I laughed and rolled my eyes. Flying always felt routine to me. I loved window seats, watching clouds pass, and tuning out the world with music. I checked in like always, grabbed a coffee from the airport cafe, and texted my mom that I boarded safely. She sent 3 emojis and a reminder. "Call me when you land. Mothers never change." When I found my seat, everything felt normal. People were settling in, buckling seatbelts, placing headphones on. A woman across the aisle was reading a book. A couple 2 rows up whispered excitedly about their vacation. It was peaceful in that calm airplane way, where everyone shares the same temporary home in the sky. The flight attendant, Lena, greeted us with a warm smile during safety checks. She looked professional, friendly, and calm, the kind of person who makes you feel like you're in good hands. Nothing about her expression hinted that she was worried about anything. We took off smoothly. I opened my novel, leaned against the window, and let the hum of the engine lull me. The man in row 12 boarded late and quietly. I noticed him only because he moved with a strange stillness, like someone trying not to be noticed, but in doing so, becoming even more noticeable. He never looked around, never relaxed into his seat. He just sat perfectly upright, staring forward. I brushed it off. Airports bring all sorts of personalities. About an hour into the flight, Lena came down the aisle offering water and snacks. When she reached my row, she placed a packet of pretzels in front of me and, without breaking her smile, slid a folded napkin onto my tray. I thought maybe it was a receipt or a note about snacks. I had no reason to expect anything alarming. Then I unfolded it. My eyes locked onto the words, "Pretend you're sick. I'll help you off." I stared at it, confusion flooding in. First, followed quickly by a tight pressure in my chest. My instinct was to laugh it off or ignore it, because who expects a message like that on a plane? I looked up at Lena, my eyebrows raised in disbelief. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. She didn't panic. She just mouthed, "Row 12. Then, with a slow and almost invisible motion, she added, "He isn't who he says he is." Right there in that pressurized cabin thousands of feet above the ground, my safe routine turned into something dark and unknown. If you're still with me, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The moment after that note changed everything. I didn't realize it then, but I was sitting just rows away from a man who wasn't supposed to be on that plane at all. My fingers pressed into the napkin so tightly, I felt it crinkle under my palm. For a moment, I couldn't move. My brain kept repeating those words, even though they were already burned into me. "Pretend you're sick. I'll help you off. Row 12 isn't who he says he is." I didn't look toward row 12 right away. Every instinct told me not to. Instead, I kept my gaze locked on the seat back in front of me, forcing myself to breathe normally, even though my chest felt tight and my heartbeat hammered like someone knocking at a locked door. The plane hummed with calm normalcy, soft chatter, a baby babbling 2 rows ahead, overhead vents blowing recycled air. Nothing about this space looked dangerous, but my body knew something was wrong before my mind fully caught up. Fear works quietly like that, subtle, creeping, tightening like a fist around your ribs. I slowly moved my water cup aside, using the reflection in the clear plastic window to glance one row over. My hands shook so slightly that I pressed them into my thighs to make it stop. Through the tiny reflection, I saw the man in row 12 again, still sitting upright, hands loosely folded, eyes fixed straight ahead, like he was waiting for something. He didn't look threatening. He didn't fidget like nervous passengers do. He didn't scroll through a phone or adjust his seat. He was too still, too controlled. His posture didn't relax once, not since boarding, like he was conserving energy or preparing. I swallowed, forcing my expression to stay neutral. I didn't want him to sense anything from me. The idea that he could somehow notice my breathing or hear my thoughts sounded dramatic, but fear scrambles logic. In moments like this, survival instinct doesn't ask permission. My phone was in airplane mode, but I opened my notes app just to pretend I was writing normally, a distraction for my hands, a way to make myself look occupied. That's when I heard footsteps again, slow ones. Lena passed by my row without looking at me this time. Instead, she checked overhead bins, talking calmly to another family like nothing in her world was wrong. The professionalism chilled me. If she was scared, and she clearly was, she didn't let it show. That made me trust her even more. 2 rows ahead, a man sneezed. A passenger laughed softly. Someone asked for ginger ale. The normalcy felt cruel. How could everything look so peaceful when my entire body felt like it was vibrating with the urge to get up and leave? But we were thousands of feet in the sky. There was no leaving, no running, no escape route except doing exactly what she told me. My thoughts spun. Why me? Why this plane? What did she see? How does she know him? I squeezed my phone harder. Then I heard a voice in my mind, my mother's voice, telling me something she always said when I traveled. Never ignore a woman who looks scared for you. Women's fear is rarely misplaced. I took a breath that trembled halfway through. The man in row 12 shifted slightly, the first movement I'd seen from him. Not stretching, not repositioning, just turning his head a few degrees as if scanning quietly. My stomach twisted. I dropped my gaze immediately to avoid eye contact. Every story I ever heard about instinct, about gut warnings, about danger hiding in plain sight flashed through me. It didn't matter that he wore normal clothes or looked calm. Predators don't advertise. They blend. Suddenly, Lena returned, moving with purpose but not urgency. She placed 2 ginger ale cans on my tray, one unopened, one with a straw, and whispered just loudly enough for only me to hear, "Sip slow, look pale." Her tone was steady, rehearsed almost, like she'd done this before. My throat went dry. I nodded, forcing my hand to not shake as I brought the straw to my lips. I took a small sip and let my shoulders slump like someone fighting nausea. She gave me a tiny nod of approval before turning, voice bright and casual. "If you need anything else, let me know." I watched her walk away, then finally allowed myself one slow glance toward the aisle. The man hadn't moved again, but the flight felt different now, heavier, charged, like the air inside the cabin shifted into something electric. There are moments in life when you realize you are not as safe as you believed, when the rules of normal life feel thin and fragile, when instinct rises up louder than reasoning. This was one of those moments. And sitting there pretending to feel sick while my heart thundered, I understood something I never learned in school. Survival sometimes begins with believing the warning, even when you don't yet see the danger. I sat hunched over, pretending to sip ginger ale while my stomach churned for real. I didn't need to fake feeling sick anymore. Fear had already taken over. My throat felt tight, my pulse beat hard in my ears, and every breath felt shallow. The hum of the engine suddenly sounded louder, like the plane itself knew something was wrong. I reminded myself again and again, stay calm, stay normal, breathe slow. While I kept my eyes down, I could feel him. Row 12, still, watching everything without looking like he was watching. People can sense attention even when no one speaks, and the weight of his presence sat on my back like a hand pushing between my shoulder blades. Minutes passed painfully slow, each second stretching like time didn't want to move forward. I listened for anything unusual, Whispers, footsteps, a change in tone from the crew, but the cabin stayed normal. Too normal. I pressed the call button, exactly like Lena instructed. My hand shook, but I forced my breathing steady. First rule of surviving fear: don't show it. Lena appeared almost instantly, like she'd been waiting for that signal. Her face shifted into concern so fast and so naturally, anyone watching would think she was responding to a real medical problem. "Not feeling well?" she asked, voice gentle and louder than earlier so nearby passengers could hear. I nodded weakly, hand on my forehead like my head was throbbing. "I feel dizzy, lightheaded." She leaned down, hand on my arm like she was comforting me, and whispered so quietly I barely heard it. "We're preparing to land soon. When the seatbelt sign turns on, you'll go first. Stay with me." I nodded slightly, feeling a tight sting behind my eyes. I wasn't going to cry, not now, but fear presses tears to the surface even when you're fighting them. To everyone else, she looked like she was performing routine care, but her hand was shaking lightly, even as she held onto the headrest like she was steadying herself. Whatever she saw in him earlier, whatever triggered her instincts, it wasn't small. She stood up and addressed the pilot from the cabin phone, voice controlled. I couldn't hear her words, but the energy changed. The captain soon announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be beginning our descent. Please take your seats and prepare for landing." That announcement always felt routine on flights. Today, it felt like a lifeline, a countdown to escape. Passengers started putting things away, tightening belts, yawning, stretching, completely unaware that something tense and dangerous sat a few rows away from them. Then it happened. Without turning my head, I sensed movement, slow, shifting presence from row 12. Something about it made my skin prickle. He turned his head slightly. I didn't look at him, but I saw his reflection in the darkened screen in front of me. His gaze wasn't wandering. He was watching the aisle, waiting for something. His face stayed expressionless, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. He didn't look sick. He looked like someone very aware of time. A chill rolled through me. Instinct whispered, "He knows." Lena passed again, this time kneeling beside me like she was checking on my condition. "We'll help you off first," she said clearly for others to hear. Then, in a whisper only meant for me, "The moment we stop moving, stand. Follow me. Don't look back." My heart hammered hard. Enough, I felt it in my fingertips. "Who is he?" I whispered, her jaw tensed. "Just trust me." There was something in her eyes, not fear alone, but urgency, sympathy, and something else I couldn't name, maybe experience from a moment in her past that looked too much like this one. The wheels touched down, a jolt, tires screeching, that familiar bounce when the plane settles on the runway. Under any other circumstance, landing feels routine. Today, it felt like a ground wire connecting me back to the world where my mother was waiting, where my brother would joke with me, where life still felt normal. The plane slowed. Seatbelt lights stayed on, but Lena stood immediately, something flight attendants rarely do before the ding. That broke the routine. People noticed. She ignored the looks. She helped me stand. "Come on," she said warmly, but her grip on my arm was firm and ready. I didn't look back. I wanted to understand. I wanted answers, but instinct screamed louder than curiosity. Curiosity can kill you. Instinct keeps you alive. As she guided me forward, I felt it, a gaze burning behind me, watching me leave. I didn't need to turn to know the man in row 12 had shifted now, no longer still and waiting. He sensed the movement, the break in pattern. The second we reached the exit and the door cracked open with that rush of fresh airport air, I felt a breath return to my lungs, a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since the moment that napkin touched my tray. And stepping off that plane, one truth settled deep into my bones. Something on that flight wasn't right, and I was never meant to understand it at 30,000 feet. Not until I reached the ground. The second my feet touched the jet bridge, a new kind of fear hit me. On the plane, it was quiet panic, the kind that lives behind your ribs and squeezes your lungs. But here, on solid ground, reality sank in heavier. I wasn't imagining anything. Something had been wrong, and now everyone else was about to see it too. Lena kept a firm but gentle hand on my arm as she guided me toward the terminal doors. Her voice sounded calm, friendly even, like she was simply helping a passenger who felt motion sick. To everyone watching, this was nothing unusual. It almost fooled me too, until I remembered the napkin, until I remembered her eyes when she mouthed those words. Row 12 isn't who he says he is. Keep walking, she whispered softly. Slow, natural, like you're dizzy. I nodded, trying to look disoriented instead of terrified. My legs were trembling anyway, so it wasn't hard. The fluorescent airport lighting felt harsh on my eyes, like the world suddenly demanded I take in every detail, every face, every direction. We passed other passengers heading toward baggage claim, chatting about layovers and weekend plans, completely unaware that danger had been sitting right behind us at 30,000 feet. When we reached the gate podium, 2 airport security officers stood waiting. Their presence felt like a wall between me and whatever threat sat back on that plane. One of them stepped forward. "Ma'am, right this way. We'll take care of you." Take care of me. Those words sounded surreal, like I had just been carried out of something far bigger than a flight. I turned to Lena, and in that moment, she wasn't just a worker in a Navy uniform. She was someone who had seen something others missed. Someone who made a choice, even if it meant getting questions, backlash, or worse, if she was wrong. She gave me a soft, reassuring nod. "You're safe now. Don't worry about your bags. I'll bring them later." I opened my mouth to say thank you, but before I could speak, the walkie-talkie on one of the officer's belts crackled. "Gate secured. Cabin hold until clearance." Cabin hold. They weren't letting passengers off yet. My heart stopped for a beat. The officer guiding me heard it too. His posture straightened. "Let's move." He walked me down a quiet staff hallway into a small airport security room. Basic beige walls, a metal desk, a water dispenser humming softly. It looked painfully ordinary, but it felt like shelter from a storm I couldn't see yet. He asked me to sit. My palms were sweaty. My throat felt thick, like I needed water but couldn't swallow. "Can you tell me exactly what the flight attendant said to you?" he asked. I repeated her words, voice low but steady. He listened carefully, nodding in understanding instead of doubt. That alone told me this wasn't random. They weren't confused. They weren't surprised. They were prepared. Then, on the small TV mounted in the corner, muted but with captions, the news switched to breaking coverage. FBI actively searching for wanted suspect traveling under false identity, believed to be connected to violent interstate abduction case, last known attempt to travel by air. A photo appeared. My breath caught. My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy for real. It was him, row 12, his face slightly younger in the picture, but unmistakable. Those eyes, too calm, too empty, stared out from the screen exactly like they had on the plane. My hand pressed against my chest instinctively. "Oh my God." The headline continued. "Suspect believed to target women traveling alone, considered extremely dangerous." My body went completely cold. The room felt smaller. My vision blurred for a second. I had been sitting 3 rows from him. I had walked onto that flight thinking it was just another trip home. I had almost ignored a stranger's warning because it felt too dramatic. The officer spoke gently, but with gravity. If she hadn't acted, this could have ended differently. "You did the right thing listening." Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sudden release of everything I had been holding tight inside my ribs. Relief hit me like a wave. Relief mixed with horror at how close I had been to danger and didn't even know it. A knock sounded on the door. Another officer peeked in, whispering something urgent. I only caught fragments. "Taken into custody. Near gate. Didn't resist. Identified immediately. Taken into custody." He was in handcuffs somewhere not far from where I sat. My knees weakened at the thought. It could have been me walking past him alone. It could have been me he followed off that plane. Then I heard the softest voice, Lena's voice, from the doorway. "You're safe." I met her eyes. They looked tired, shaken, but strong. "You trusted me," she said softly. "Thank you for that." I shook my head, voice barely working. "No, you saved me." She gave a small, tired smile. We saved each other. In that moment, the world felt quiet again. Not because danger was gone, but because I understood something powerful. Safety sometimes comes from strangers, and danger sometimes sits quietly in the row behind you. I didn't see evil's face until I watched the news. And I didn't understand courage until I saw a flight attendant risk her job and her comfort to protect me. That day, the world looked different. Not darker, just sharper, more real, more awake. And I realized something that I will never unlearn. Instinct whispers before danger speaks. And sometimes heroes wear navy uniforms and carry drink carts. Sitting in that quiet airport room, everything finally caught up to me. The adrenaline began to fade, and in its place came a deep, shaking breath I didn't even realize I had been holding. It was like my body finally understood I was safe, and the weight of what almost happened settled on my shoulders all at once. My hands trembled uncontrollably. My jaw felt tight. I could hear my heartbeat loud in my ears, steady now, but still powerful, reminding me that I was here, alive, whole, because someone paid attention. The officer offered me a bottle of water, and when I lifted it, my fingers shook so hard I almost dropped it. I wasn't embarrassed. Shock does not apologize. It simply exists, demanding time and space to be processed. He sat across from me, calm and patient, like he spoke to people surviving moments like this more often than anyone should. "You did everything right," he said gently. "You listened. That matters." I nodded slowly. I didn't understand what was happening. I still don't fully. "You didn't need to," he replied. "Sometimes understanding can wait. Staying alive can't." Those words stayed with me. They felt like the truth of every instinct humans ever developed. Not every danger announces itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in row 12 with calm eyes and steady hands, waiting for a moment. And sometimes the only voice you have to trust is the quiet one inside you saying, "Something is off." After police cleared the corridor, Lena came into the room again. She looked exhausted now, like she had been holding her breath for hours too. We locked eyes, and I felt emotion rise in my chest all over again. Without thinking, I stood up and hugged her. She hugged me back tightly, one hand steady on my back like she was still protecting me even though the danger had passed. "Thank you," I whispered. She shook her head softly. "Thank you for listening. Some people don't. Some think we overreact." There was a softness in her voice, but a heaviness too, like she was speaking from lived experience, from a memory she never forgot. And suddenly I realized, heroes don't always look bold or loud or dramatic. Sometimes they look like a flight attendant who notices what others don't, who trusts her instincts, who chooses to act even when she knows people might question her later. We sat together for a few minutes, quiet but connected through something real. Fear faced, danger escaped, trust given and returned. Then the officer returned and explained that the man was already detained and being questioned. They believed he was traveling under a false identity to avoid capture. "And if you had gotten off that plane like everyone else," the officer said with a steady seriousness, "there is a very real chance he would have followed you." My breath hitched. A cold truth slid through me. My life might have split into two timelines right there. One where I walked out normally, unaware, within arm's reach of someone dangerous, and another where a stranger's warning saved me. Life sometimes turns on invisible hinges. When I was allowed to leave, Lena walked with me toward baggage claim. Each step felt like stepping further away from something dark and closer to solid ground. The normal airport sounds returned. Rolling suitcases, family reunions, casual conversations. Sounds that felt unbelievably precious now. I pulled out my phone and saw missed calls from my mom and brother. 2 messages from my mom. "Just checking on you. Are you okay? Please call, I didn't call yet." I couldn't speak without my voice shaking, but I texted back, "I'm safe. I'll call soon. I love you." Then I sent my brother a short message. "You won't believe what happened." Outside the airport, as I waited for a rideshare, I finally breathed deeply. The cool air brushed my face, grounding me in a world that suddenly seemed sharper, more precious, more fragile. I wasn't terrified anymore. I was aware, grateful, changed. What happened didn't make me paranoid. It made me wiser. It taught me that bad people don't announce themselves and good people don't always wear capes. Sometimes heroes hand you pretzels and whisper warnings. Sometimes safety comes from trusting intuition, even when logic wants to argue. When I got home that night, I sat on my bed, shoes still on, jacket still zipped, staring at the wall as everything replayed. I thought about how life doesn't give you dramatic music or flashing signs when something dangerous is near. It gives you tiny alarms, a glance, a gut feeling, a shaking hand, offering a napkin. And now I will never ignore those alarms again. If you are watching this right now, I want you to remember something. Trusting your instincts is not fear, it is wisdom. And when someone tries to protect you, even in a quiet, unexpected way, listen. It might save your life. Thank you for being here with me through this story. If you felt something from it, or if it reminded you how precious awareness is, make sure you subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Stay aware, stay safe, and never ignore that small voice inside you. It speaks for a reason.